Wendell Wayman has looked at the world and decided that there is a creator. But what next? How does the modern man relate to this creator? We'll be taking a journey with Wendell as he tries to find out who God is. Wendell studied the New Testament, especially the book of Acts, and some things about the church were emerging. God protects the early Christians with miracles. The church was hated and persecuted. The apostles cast out demons, healed the sick, and raised the dead. They worshiped daily at the temple and had communion services in each other's homes. They held all things in common and fasted and prayed together. Peter showed himself to clearly be the leader when God sent him to preach to Israel's priests, and Christians laid their possessions at his feet. And God allowed Peter to decree the death penalty because a couple lied to Peter, and God enacted the punishment right then in front of the people. The church leaders interpret scriptures. Wendell even noted that the early church held an ecumenical council that authoritatively gave instructions for the worldwide church. That was the kind of church Wendell was looking for. Wendell Wayman was watching another YouTube debate between Calvinists, and one speaker mentioned the name of a great intellect who was the pastor of a church in his state. Wendell looked up how close that church was, an hour and 50 minutes from him. He made plans to visit the church that Sunday. 2 hours to drive for God didn't seem like too bad a sacrifice. The sermon was great. The pastor graduated from an Ivy League school with his THD, and Wendell was excited to find out that he used terms that stretched his vocabulary. Wendell made mental notes of what the preacher said that he would research later. What did ecclesia mean? What was liturgy? What was the Nicene Creed? Was Nicene a Latin derivative of the word nice, or did it come from the French city Nice? He quoted St. Augustine and spoke of the early church. Wendell couldn't wait to go back to the church. The next week, the pastor quoted from the writings of a 2nd century Christian martyr named Justin, and Wendell was stunned to find out early Christians had theological writings available to Christians today. After church, some longtime members sitting next to him took him up to the front to meet the pastor. The pastor shook his hand and heartily answered all Wendell's questions about early church writings. Wendell went home and immediately ordered the Ante-Nicene and Nicene Fathers' writings and began downloading all he could find of early Christian theology. Research. Wendell had always enjoyed it. At university, he dug into research but hated the writing of what he found. It was irritating to weed out the abundant information he amassed into a small few pages. It never told the whole story. Now he could absorb it all without the need to squeeze out the nuances that make up reality. He found the Didache. That was fascinating because it might have been as early as the 1st century, written at the same time as the New Testament. But for sure, by the 2nd century, Wendell's head was blown away by the thought of reading stuff written that far back. The document contained the same rules for Christians as the Bible, like no coveting or bearing false witness, but it added a few Wendell didn't remember, like don't practice witchcraft or magic. No surprise there. You shall not murder a child by abortion nor kill that which is begotten. You shall not hate any man, but reprove him. Don't afflict those already distressed. And it gave instructions on baptism. It's best that one should fast for a day or two beforehand, that baptism be in cold, moving water, like a river. But if that's not available, pour water on the person 3 times. It spoke about communion and prayers and the last days. Wendell read the epistles of Clement and the Shepherd of Hermas, thought to be inerrant scripture in several Christian areas. He read the writings of Polycarp, Ignatius, Irenaeus, Origen, Tertullian, and Augustine, who he had already had a familiarity with. Wendell read from first-person sources how the early church was Jewish and how the pagans flooded the church in the first few centuries. But much of church liturgy came directly from the Jewish scriptures and traditions, the prayers, the readings, the incense and the decorations, the symbols, the communion meal, and the sacrifice. For months, Wendell immersed himself in the study of the early church, the councils, the creeds. He read all the early ecclesiastical histories he could find. He found a particular fascination with the development of the Bible. He listened to podcasts, debates, videos, and read books by scholars such as F. Bruce, Packer, Bart Ehrman, MacDonald, Miller, Beckwith, Pelican. Wendell thought that the development of the Bible was the most fascinating of anything else he had studied. Are there any churches today that would be part of that church that put together the scriptures? Many churches claimed to go all the way back to that church, but did any of them really?